My wife confessed her love for my brother in front of everyone at our wedding, so I cancelled everything, and now her family blames me. Let me start by saying that my older brother, Garrett, has been more than just a sibling to me. He's been my best friend for as long as I can remember. Growing up, he wasn't just someone I shared a house with, he was my protector, my guide, the one I looked up to in every way. From an early age, Garrett took me under his wing, shaping me into the person I am today in ways I probably didn't even realize at the time. One of my earliest and clearest memories is of Garrett teaching me how to ride a bike. I was a shy kid, the kind who hesitated before trying anything new, but Garrett was patient. He ran alongside me, one hand gripping the seat, steadying me until I was ready to balance on my own. I'll never forget that moment when I finally got it right. Garrett was right there, cheering louder than anyone, just as proud as I was. That's just who he was. He always encouraged me, pushed me when I needed it, and never let me feel like I was facing things alone. School was tough for me. I wasn't the most outgoing kid, and making friends never came easily. But Garrett? He made sure I was never left out. He introduced me to his friends, made sure I was included in things, and helped me navigate all those awkward early social situations that used to overwhelm me. Because of him, I never felt like I didn't belong. Little by little, I started coming out of my shell, and looking back, I know I have Garrett to thank for that. Our bond only got stronger as we got older. Every afternoon after school, you'd find us out in the neighborhood riding our bikes, playing games, or just goofing around. Those were the best times, just the two of us, having fun and making memories. And the thing is, we hardly ever fought. Sure, we had our little spats like any siblings do, but they never lasted long. Garrett was always the good-looking one between us, and I noticed that pretty early on. Girls were drawn to him everywhere we went, and he never minded the attention. If anything, he enjoyed it. I watched over the years as he charmed his way into and out of relationships, leaving more than a few broken hearts behind. But all of that changed the day he met Nina, my ex-sister-in-law. From the moment Garrett met her, it was different. He was the one falling hard this time, and anyone who knew him could see it. This wasn't just some passing fling, this was real love. It didn't take long before they got married and started a family, and honestly, I was happy for him. Nina made him better. She wasn't just his wife, she became like a sister to me. We clicked right away, and it didn't take long before I saw her as part of the family. The three of us, Garrett, Nina, and me, became a tight-knit group. Whether it was grabbing drinks, throwing parties, or just hanging out, we were always together, and it felt right. Nina fit into our lives so naturally, and I couldn't have been happier to have her around. Then, when I met Jocelyn, who was just my girlfriend at the time, I wanted to bring her into the fold. I wanted her to feel that same sense of belonging that I had with Garrett and Nina. Luckily, she and Nina hit it off immediately. They became fast friends, and seeing them get along so well was a huge relief. Garrett and I were both thrilled. Our little circle had grown, and everything felt even more complete. Looking back, I never saw any cracks in our group. To me, it was perfect. We were all close, supportive, and genuinely happy. Maybe I was just too caught up in it all, too focused on how good everything felt to notice anything else. That's why, when I got a call from Nina one day while I was at work, my stomach dropped. Her voice was shaky, thick with tears, and the urgency in her tone told me something was seriously wrong. The fact that she specifically asked me not to tell Garrett only made me more uneasy. I agreed to meet her without hesitation. Whatever was going on, I knew it had to be big. We met at a small cafe near my office, and as soon as I walked in, I spotted her sitting in the corner. She looked miserable, her face was red and puffy, her eyes swollen like she'd been crying for hours. My heart sank. I went straight to her, gave her a hug, and asked her what was wrong, bracing myself for whatever she was about to say. And then, she broke down completely. She could barely get the words out, but eventually, she did. She had caught Garrett talking to another woman, one of his co-workers. My mind struggled to keep up with what she was saying, like my brain refused to process it. She told me she had found messages between them, photos, texts that left no room for misinterpretation. And the worst part? They had told each other "I love you" more than once. I sat there in shock. I had truly believed Garrett had changed. I thought he was done with all that he had left his old ways behind for good. Seeing the pain in Nina's eyes, hearing the way her voice shook as she spoke, I knew this wasn't just some misunderstanding. Then she showed me the screenshots. And there it was, proof, right in front of me. No matter how badly I wanted to deny it, the truth was staring me in the face. Garrett, my brother, the man I thought had finally settled down, was risking everything for an affair. The pictures were bad. So bad that I felt embarrassed for him, ashamed on his behalf. I swallowed hard and asked Nina what she planned to do. Had she confronted him yet? She shook her head. No. Not yet. Instead, she had already made up her mind she was going to quietly pack up her things, take their child, and leave for her parents' house before telling Garrett. Her hands were trembling as she spoke, and when she looked at me, I saw real fear in her eyes. She was terrified of how he might react when he found out. I tried to reassure her, telling her that Garrett would never hurt her. But she just looked down, shook her head, and whispered, "I thought I knew him too," and clearly, I didn't. Nina didn't want to take any more chances with Garrett, and that hit me hard. I understood her fear, her reasoning, because if he could betray her like this, who's to say what else he might be capable of? It wasn't just about the affair itself, it was about trust, or more accurately, the complete and utter destruction of it. Seeing her sitting there, so vulnerable, I told her that if she needed anything at all, she could count on me. I'd be there, no questions asked. She nodded, still visibly shaken, and I could only hope that my words gave her even the smallest bit of comfort in the chaos her life had suddenly turned into. And then, just when I thought she had told me the worst of it, she hesitated. She looked like she was debating whether or not to say more, her fingers fidgeting with the napkin in front of her. Finally, after a deep breath, she spoke. "There's something else you need to know." I felt a cold sense of dread creeping over me. What could possibly be worse than what I had just heard? Nina hesitated again before finally getting the words out. She had found more messages, this time, between Garrett and my girlfriend, Jocelyn. My mind froze. I frowned, struggling to process what she was saying, my first instinct being denial. That didn't make sense. Garrett and Jocelyn? No way. But then, she pulled out her phone and showed me the screenshots. And suddenly, my confusion only deepened. The messages between Garrett and Jocelyn weren't just casual check-ins or occasional conversations. They were frequent, far more than I had ever realized. From the looks of it, they had been talking almost every single day. Nina, clearly trying to be careful with her words, told me that she didn't want to interfere in my relationship, but she had noticed something odd. Despite how close she and I were, I didn't even talk to her that often, yet my girlfriend and my brother seemed to be in constant contact. That alone made my stomach twist. I scrolled through the messages, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and unease. They weren't outright inappropriate, but something about them didn't sit right with me. Jocelyn had been sending Garrett funny videos, pictures of dogs, sunsets, random little things that made her smile. On the surface, it all seemed harmless until I realized she never sent any of those things to me. Why was she sharing those moments with Garrett instead of with me? Nina pointed out that there might be nothing to it, but given what she had just learned about Garrett's infidelity, she felt it was only right to bring this to my attention. She didn't want me to be blindsided the way she had been. And I knew, just from the look on her face, that she was genuinely concerned for me. As much as I wanted to believe that there was some innocent explanation, I couldn't ignore the knot forming in my stomach. I thanked Nina for telling me, knowing how hard it must have been for her to bring it up. I reassured her that I'd talked to Jocelyn, that I'd figure out what was really going on. But as I walked out of that cafe, my thoughts were a storm. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, not just for Nina, but for myself too. What if there was more to this? What if Garrett wasn't just betraying his wife, but me as well? I needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. When I finally worked up the nerve to confront Jocelyn, I tried to approach it gently. I didn't want to start a fight, I just needed to understand. But the second I brought it up, her reaction was instant and intense. She was offended. Almost outraged that I would even think to question her about it. She scoffed, called it ridiculous, and before I could say another word, she shoved her phone into my hands. "Go through it," she said, challenging me. "If you really don't trust me, go ahead." The whole thing escalated so fast, and I found myself trying to calm her down, telling her that I did trust her, that I wasn't accusing her of anything, I just didn't understand why she was sending all these things to Garrett instead of to me. But instead of giving me a straight answer, Jocelyn turned it around on me. She said I never appreciated those kinds of things the way Garrett did, that he shared her interests more than I did, so naturally, she sent things to him. Then, as if to reassure me, she insisted that Garrett was like a big brother to her, just like he was to me, and that she would never cross any lines. The way she said it, it all sounded so reasonable. And in the heat of the moment, I started feeling guilty for even bringing it up. I didn't want to seem like some jealous, paranoid boyfriend who didn't trust his own girlfriend. So I did the worst thing I could have done in that moment, I apologized. I told her I was sorry for doubting her. That I hadn't meant to accuse her of anything. And just like that, the conversation was over. But looking back now, I see it for what it really was. Jocelyn had been gaslighting me the entire time. I wish I hadn't let her twist things around, hadn't let her convince me that I was overreacting. The red flags were there, clear as day, but I ignored them. If I had trusted my gut instead of letting myself be talked down, maybe things would have turned out differently. But I didn't. and the damage was already done. As for Garrett and Nina, their marriage didn't survive. It ended in a bitter, ugly divorce. Even with all the proof she had, Garrett refused to take responsibility. Instead of owning up to his mistakes, he went on the attack, telling anyone who would listen that Nina was just a gold digger, that she had only married him for his looks and his money. He painted himself as the victim, completely ignoring the fact that he was the one who had destroyed everything. Whenever I tried to talk to him about it, to get him to see the truth, he shut me down immediately. He got angry, defensive, dismissive. Being with the same person for years gets boring, he told me once. One day, you'll get it. It was infuriating. Disheartening. This was the same brother I had looked up to my whole life, and now I barely recognized him. During the divorce, Garrett lost almost half of everything he had. He was also ordered to pay child support, which only made him more bitter. And instead of trying to rebuild, to take accountability, he spiraled, falling deeper into the self-destructive habits that had ruined his marriage in the first place. And the worst part? I couldn't do a damn thing to stop him. After the divorce, Garrett spiraled. His behavior became more erratic by the day, and the drinking got worse, way worse. Most nights, he would show up at my place completely blacked out, barely able to stand, only to crash on my couch until morning. He'd mumble about how much he hated sleeping alone in that big, empty house, the same house that once felt warm and full of life when Nina and their child were still there. Now, it was nothing but a painful reminder of everything he had lost, all because of his own mistakes. I wanted to help him. I wanted to make him see that he needed to take responsibility for what had happened, but he was too lost in his own bitterness and regret to listen. All I could do was be there for him, even as I watched him self-destruct. The divorce changed Garrett in ways I never could have imagined. He was never the same after that. His reckless, self-destructive habits only got worse, drinking, skipping work, and sleeping around even more than before. When we went out in public, he would shamelessly ogle women, making crude comments without a second thought. But what really started to get under my skin was how he acted around Jocelyn. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Garrett had always been a flirt, and given everything he was going through, I figured it was just another phase, another way for him to distract himself from his own misery. But the more I paid attention, the more I noticed little things that didn't sit right. Jocelyn would blush during their conversations, giggling like a schoolgirl whenever Garrett joked with her. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just friendly banter. I knew Garrett. I trusted him. He would never cross a line with my girlfriend, I was sure of that. But it wasn't Garrett I was worried about. It was Jocelyn. She seemed almost giddy around him. The way she reacted to him, the way she leaned in when he spoke, the way her eyes lingered on him a little too long, it started gnawing at me, making me question things I never thought I'd have to question. I couldn't keep ignoring it. So, one night, I sat Jocelyn down and laid it all out. I was direct, more direct than I'd ever been with her. I told her that if she kept acting this way around Garrett, I wouldn't hesitate to walk away. My brother would never betray me, I made that clear. So if there was a problem, it wasn't with him, it was with her. My words clearly rattled her. Her face paled, and she immediately started apologizing. She insisted that she never realized she was acting inappropriately and promised she'd be more mindful of it in the future. Jocelyn assured me she never meant to make me uncomfortable, that she would never disrespect me like that. She seemed genuinely remorseful. And for a while, I believed her. To her credit, after that conversation, she made an effort to change. She pulled back from Garrett, no longer engaging in playful one-on-one banter with him. She was careful, more careful than before, and I appreciated that. Over time, the tension between us eased. Things started feeling normal again, and I found myself feeling more confident about our relationship. So much so that earlier this year, I proposed. It felt like the right time. We had been together for a long time, and marriage seemed like the natural next step. When I got down on one knee, Jocelyn didn't hesitate, she said yes without a second thought. We started planning the wedding, and while I was excited about our future, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Jocelyn wasn't acting the way I thought a bride-to-be would. She was quieter, more subdued than usual. She didn't seem to have the excitement I expected. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, chalking it up to her tendency to overthink everything. But as the wedding day got closer, it became harder to ignore. I brought it up to her a few times, gently asking if something was wrong. Every time, she reassured me that she was fine, just dealing with the usual pre-wedding jitters. But then there were moments when I'd find her alone in the bathroom, crying. When I asked what was wrong, she always brushed it off, blaming stress, saying the wedding planning was overwhelming. Her explanations never quite sat right with me. But I didn't push. I wanted to believe she was just nervous. I wanted to believe that everything was fine. Meanwhile, Garrett was surprisingly supportive. He seemed genuinely happy for me, going out of his way to help with the wedding preparations. He even threw me a grand bachelor party, his treat, insisting that I needed one last wild night before settling down. I'll admit, we had a great time. And so, yesterday, I arrived at the wedding venue feeling confident that everything was finally falling into place. I had been told that Jocelyn had arrived earlier and was getting ready in the bridal suite with her bridesmaids, so I had no reason to worry. Garrett and I, along with the rest of our friends, got dressed for the ceremony. My parents stopped by to congratulate me, beaming with pride. Seeing how happy they were, how excited everyone was for me, only added to my own anticipation. Then, the ceremony began. And when I saw Jocelyn for the first time in her wedding gown, walking down the aisle towards me, I swear it felt like a dream. She was breathtaking. Absolutely stunning. In that moment, nothing else mattered. This was the woman I was about to marry. The woman I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I could feel the emotion welling up inside me as we exchanged our vows, making promises that I truly believed in. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception, and the party kicked off in full swing. Everyone was laughing, drinking, dancing, celebrating the night away. And Jocelyn? She was smiling, but there was something about her smile that felt off. Like it wasn't entirely real. Like it was forced. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was bothering her. And deep down, I think a part of me already knew, I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. I kept checking in on Jocelyn throughout the night, making sure she was okay while also mingling with our guests. Every time I asked, she gave me the same answer, she was fine. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness in her smile. Something was off. Then, in the middle of the celebration, Garrett clinked his glass, calling for everyone's attention. He stood up, raising his drink, and launched into a speech about how proud and happy he was for me. He cracked a joke about how he couldn't wait to see little versions of me and Jocelyn running around one day, which got a good laugh from the crowd. Instinctively, I turned to Jocelyn, expecting her to be laughing along with everyone else. But she wasn't. Instead, she looked furious. Her eyes were locked onto Garrett, sharp and burning with something I couldn't quite place. She wasn't just upset, she was seething. I leaned in and whispered, asking what was wrong, but she didn't respond. She didn't even look at me. She just kept staring at Garrett, her jaw clenched tight as he continued his speech. A sense of unease crept over me. As Garrett wrapped up his toast, the guests took turns offering their congratulations, raising their glasses, and sharing their well wishes. Through it all, Jocelyn barely spoke. The only thing she did was drink. Glass after glass of champagne. That worried me. I knew Jocelyn, she was a light drinker. She never indulged like this. Seeing her downing drinks so quickly sent another wave of anxiety through me, but I tried to push it aside. Then, later in the night, her father took the microphone. He spoke warmly about how happy he was for us, about how grateful he was to have me as a son-in-law. His words were heartfelt, and I smiled, raising my glass in a toast. That's when it all fell apart. Just as I was about to thank everyone for being there, Jocelyn snatched the microphone out of my hands rudely, aggressively. She stumbled to her feet, and my stomach sank as I realized just how drunk she was. Concerned, I whispered, asking if she needed anything, but she just shoved me aside. Then she started speaking. I know everyone here is celebrating me and Garrett. Her voice slurred slightly, but her words rang loud and clear. My whole body stiffened. I felt every eye in the room shift toward us. A ripple of confusion swept through the crowd. I see everyone smiling and laughing, she went on, her voice shaking. But I don't feel the same. I don't feel happy sitting next to this man. She pointed at me. The air in the room changed in an instant. The joy, the laughter, it all vanished, replaced by stunned silence. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. My mouth was dry, my mind spinning, trying to make sense of what was happening. For years, I've kept my mouth shut, Jocelyn continued, her voice thick with emotion. I've hidden my feelings because I was told it was wrong to feel this way. But I can't keep up this act any longer. My gut twisted. No. No, no, no. Then she turned to Garrett. And with a voice raw with emotion, she said the words that shattered me. I'd been in love with Garrett for years. The room fell deathly still. I sat frozen, unable to breathe, unable to move, as she continued. Even though I feel ashamed about it, she choked out, I can't hide my love for him anymore. I turned to Garrett, desperate for some kind of explanation, hoping this was some kind of sick joke. But the look on his face mirrored my own pure, unfiltered shock. This wasn't a joke. Jocelyn wasn't done. She turned back to me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't even comprehend. I'm sorry, she said. But I married you only as a consolation prize, because I knew I could never have Garrett. A dull ringing filled my ears. My body felt detached, weightless, like I was watching this unfold from outside myself. My own wife, the woman I had just exchanged vows with, had confessed, in front of everyone, that she never loved me. That she had only married me because she couldn't have my brother. Before I could even react, her father rushed forward, yanking the microphone out of her hands. Her brothers were on her in an instant, trying to drag her away, pulling her toward a back room so she could sober up. But Jocelyn wasn't done. She fought against them, screaming Garrett's name, her voice echoing through the hall. I sat there, utterly humiliated, unable to speak, unable to move. Everything around me blurred, the weight of what had just happened crushing me from all sides. Garrett and my parents rushed to my side, their faces filled with concern, disbelief, but all I could feel was nothing. Numbness. The festive atmosphere was gone. The room had turned cold, filled with nothing but stunned silence and awkward stares. The woman I had just married, the woman I had planned to build my future with, had destroyed everything in a single moment. She had made it clear, in front of all our family and friends, that she never loved me. I had never felt so humiliated in my life. Right then and there, I made my decision. I stood up, and with my voice shaking equal parts rage, betrayal, and heartbreak, I announced that I was ending the marriage. That there would be no honeymoon. That I would be filing for divorce immediately. Then I turned and walked out. I went straight to the nearest bar, ordering drink after drink, trying to drown out the weight of what had just happened. But no matter how much I drank, the pain wouldn't dull. When I woke up this morning, my head pounding, my phone was flooded with missed calls and messages from my family. Garrett had been trying to reach me all night, as had my parents. They assured me they supported my decision and wanted to make sure I was okay. But Jocelyn's family? That was a different story. Her father and brothers had been calling, urging me to reconsider, saying Jocelyn had been drunk and didn't mean what she said. They wanted me to give her a chance to explain. But the message from Jocelyn's mother was what really made my stomach turn. She admitted that while she was embarrassed by what had happened, she believed there was truth in Jocelyn's confession. That her daughter's feelings for Garrett were real. And then she had the audacity to suggest that instead of a divorce, I should let Jocelyn and Garrett go on the honeymoon together. To see if there was really something between them. I nearly threw up reading that. There was no going back from this. Update 1. I want to clear a few things up. First, Garrett never betrayed me. If he had been involved with Jocelyn in any way, she would have said so at the wedding. This was entirely one-sided. Jocelyn had feelings for him, but Garrett never reciprocated. Second, I spoke to Garrett about everything. He was horrified, deeply remorseful for what happened, and assured me he would never do something like that to me. Yes, he had a history of infidelity with his ex-wife, but when it came to me, I knew he wouldn't cross that line. Update 2. A few days later, I finally sat down with Jocelyn. She looked miserable, her face streaked with tears. But I stood firm. I told her I was moving forward with the divorce, that nothing she said could change my mind. She apologized over and over for calling me a consolation prize. But she never once apologized for loving Garrett. She admitted she had developed feelings for him over the years, but she always knew he would never return them. So, to stay close to him, she stayed with me instead. Hearing that felt like another knife to the heart. I blocked her and her family. Luckily, we had a prenup, so she wouldn't get a dime from me. Update 3 weeks later, I had a final conversation with Garrett. I asked if he would ever consider dating Jocelyn now that she was divorcing me. His answer? Absolute disgust. He said he'd never, in a million years, be with someone like her. He apologized for any past flirtation and promised to be more mindful of my relationships in the future. And you know what? I believe him. I lost a wife, but I didn't lose my brother. And after everything? I think I'm going to be okay.